I'm sorry, money is tight right now. He nodded sadly. A few days later, I saw Marcos's story on social media. A party, expensive gifts, all paid for by my parents. The caption read, "Happy birthday to the best nephew in the world. We love you." My son looked at me with questions in his eyes. Am I not the best for them? I held his gaze and with a lump in my throat answered firmly, I understand now. We are no longer part of this. The next day my parents arrived with tears in their eyes. Mateo's birthday was supposed to be a happy day. I had planned everything. His favorite chocolate cake, the decorations, a small group of friends. But when I asked my parents if they wanted to contribute, their answer was quick and careless. I'm sorry, honey, but money is tight right now, Isabel said over the phone, her voice laced with false sadness. You know how things are these days, Fernando added. I looked at Mateo, who was sitting nearby, drawing in his notebook silently. He didn't say anything, just nodded when I told him his grandparents' response. But in his eyes I saw the sadness. He was used to disappointment. I didn't argue with my parents. I learned a long time ago that there was no point. They always had excuses, always a reason why helping me or my son was inconvenient. A few days later, while checking my phone, I saw a notification for Marcos's story, a new post. I clicked, not expecting anything special. But as soon as the image loaded, my stomach clenched. A lavish birthday party, bright decorations, a huge cake, expensive gifts, and there they were, my parents laughing, posing with Marcos's son, their favorite grandson. The caption read, Happy birthday to the best nephew in the world. We love you. It felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. I turned off my phone and stared at the wall for a long time. My son, my sweet boy who never asked for much, didn't even deserve a small gift from them. But for my brother's son, they gave everything. Exhaling slowly, feeling my hands clench into fists, I stood up. I walked over to Mateo and hugged him tightly. I understand now, I whispered. We are no longer part of this. The next day my parents appeared at my door, their eyes filled with tears. I stood in the doorway blocking the entrance. My mother wiped her tears with trembling fingers while my father let out a long sigh, clearly searching for the right words to convince me. We know you're upset, Isabel began, but please listen to us. This has all been a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? I crossed my arms. Really? You knew it was your grandson's birthday. You didn't even think to buy him a gift, and days later, I see you throwing a huge party for Marcos's son. They remained silent, and that's what hurt the most. I took a step towards them. You didn't even apologize. You didn't come because you felt guilty. You came because you need something. Fernando's jaw tensed as if ready to argue, but I already knew the truth. What is it this time? I sighed. A house remodel? Medical expenses? Or did you spend all your money helping Marcos again? And now you're coming to me to fix it? My mother flinched, and my father's expression darkened. Oh, I was right. We were planning to buy a new car, Fernando admitted, his voice strained. But things changed, and we were hoping you could lend us the money. I finished for him, letting out a bitter laugh. You're a smart girl, you'll figure it out. My mother told me when I was 20 and asked for a little help to pay off my last student loan. At the same time, they were buying Marcos his first car. We'd love to help you, but you already have a job, my father added, and my brother, twirling the car keys in his hand, simply shrugged. I took a deep breath and slowly shook my head. You know what's changed now? I'm done fixing everyone's problems. You have more children. Ask them for help. My mother clenched her fists. You know your brother. Oh, I know, I interrupted. He's irresponsible, lazy, and used to you fixing his life. Just like you're used to me fixing everything. But I'm tired. My father straightened up, trying to sound authoritative. Don't be dramatic. We're your family. Family. I let out a dry, humorless laugh. Then where were you when I needed you? Why wasn't he family to you then? Silence. I'm not your bank anymore, I stated firmly. And I'm not going to let you pretend to care about my son, only when it's convenient for you. If you want to be in his life, prove it with actions, not empty words. I took a step back and closed the door in their stunned faces. This time for good. I didn't expect peace after closing the door on them. I knew my parents too well. Silence had never been their style when they wanted something. They insisted until they got it, and this time it wasn't just about family pride or hurt egos. It was about money. 2 days later my mother called. Then again and again. When I saw the 5th missed call, I finally answered just to end this once and for all. "We need to talk," she said, her voice tense. "We already talked." "No, you slammed the door in our faces like a spoiled child," she snapped. "That's not a conversation. Neither is pretending to care about my son when all you really want is a check," I retorted coldly. I heard her gasp, as if I had insulted her in the worst possible way. "You think so poorly of us?" "I think exactly what you taught me to think." Silence. Then a deep sigh. "Fine, we'll get to the point. We're in a difficult situation. The money for the car, we already put down a deposit. If we don't pay the rest, we'll lose it. We just need a loan." I laughed. I really laughed. "A loan?" I repeated. "Do you think I don't remember how the last loan ended? Or the one before that? How many times have I helped you, and never saw a single euro back? This time is different," she insisted. "We were counting on you. We thought—" "I know what you thought," I interrupted coldly. "You thought I would continue to be the same fool as always, that I would bite my tongue and give you the money like I always have. But that's over." Her voice hardened. "So you're going to leave us high and dry?" "You're not high and dry," I snapped. "You just want a new car you can't afford. That's not being broke. That's poor planning." I heard Fernando muttering something angrily in the background. Then he grabbed the phone. "We raised you," he growled. "And this is how you repay us?" There it was, the guilt trip, the typical "we gave you life." The absurd "you owe us everything." I didn't answer. My voice firm. "You raised me to learn to take care of myself, and now I finally am. You're ungrateful." I hung up before he could finish. I was 24, sitting in my parents' kitchen, exhausted after a long shift at work. "We need help," Isabel had said, her expression weary. "Just a little money to pay some bills. Your father had some unforeseen expenses, and your brother." "What about Marcos?" I asked. She hesitated, then forced a weak smile. "He's trying. But you know how things are for him." Yes, I knew. I also knew my help wasn't for the bills. It was for Marcos's new business idea, the one he was so sure would take off. The same business that collapsed months later, taking all my savings with it. They promised they'd pay me back. They never did. And now they were trying again. That night another call came, this time from my brother. I thought about ignoring it, but curiosity won. "Very brave now, huh?" He sneered as soon as I answered. "What do you want, Marcos?" "You know exactly what," he snapped. "You made it much worse for Mom and Dad. If you had helped, they wouldn't be desperate now." I clenched my jaw. "Desperate? Why? For a luxury car?" "It's not just about the car," he exploded. "They took out loans, maxed out their credit cards, and you could fix it, but you're too busy playing the victim." My stomach tightened. So that was it. They were so sure I would help that they spent money they didn't even have. "It's not my problem," I said. "You're serious? You'd let them drown in debt." "I'd let them face the consequences of their own decisions." "You're unbelievable. You sit on your pedestal while Mom cries herself to sleep. Dad is going crazy trying to fix this, and you don't care." "Oh, I do care," I replied. "I care that Mateo never feels the way I felt growing up. I care that he never has to wonder if he truly matters. But you have no right to make me feel guilty, Marcos. Not after everything." There was a moment of silence, then he scoffed. "Fine. You want to burn all bridges? Don't come crawling back when you realize you're alone." I smiled ironically. "Funny," I said. "I was already alone long before I pushed you away." And for the second time that day I hung up the phone. Let them figure it out. Let them struggle. I wasn't their solution anymore, and I never would be again. For the first time in my life I didn't feel guilty. I expected to feel it, cutting ties with my parents, refusing to rescue them. A year ago, all of this would have consumed me with remorse and doubt. But now I only felt relief. That night I sat on the couch with Mateo, watching one of his favorite cartoons. His laughter filled the room, carefree, innocent. He had no idea of the war being waged outside these walls, and that's exactly how I wanted it to stay. But the peace didn't last long. The next morning my mother appeared at my door. She didn't come alone. She brought my father, Marcos, even Lucia. They were all there, as if this were some kind of twisted intervention. We need to talk, my mother said. I didn't move. We already did. You don't understand, my father interjected, his voice tense. We're in serious trouble. I exhaled slowly. Here we go. It's not my problem, I said without emotion. Marcos laughed scornfully. Of course not. Because now that you have your own little life, you think you're better than us, right? No, Marcos, I retorted. When you need something, I don't matter to you in the slightest, let alone my son. My mother stepped forward, her voice cracking. Please. We were wrong, okay? We thought you would help us and we spent money we didn't have. Now the bank is pressuring us. If we don't pay, we'll lose the house. I blinked. My father let out a long sigh. We used the house as collateral for the car loan, and then there were other expenses. Other expenses. I didn't even want to know what they were. How much? I asked with a chilling calm. My mother swallowed. 60,000. I let out a dry laugh.
60,000 euros.
I shook my head. They were so sure I would come running, weren't they? No one answered. And now you expect me to fix it, I continued. To pay your debts like I always have. To be the responsible one, the good daughter. My father's face hardened. We raised you. We gave you everything. And now you're going to let us lose our house. I clenched my jaw, feeling my nails dig into my palms. I was 18, sitting at the dining room table with my university acceptance letter in hand. That's nice, my mother said without even looking up. Nice. I repeated. This is huge. I got a scholarship, but I still need a little help for. Oh, honey, she interrupted with a sigh. We'd love to, but things are tight. Your brother needs a new car for work, and we're still paying off the house. From across the table, Marcos gave me a mocking smile. Looks like you'll have to take out a loan. I exhaled slowly, returning to the present. They had made it clear to me my entire life. I was never the priority. So now, let me make something clear to you. I looked my father directly in the eyes. I owe you nothing. My mother choked out a cry, her hands shaking. You can't be serious. We're family. I laughed coldly. Oh, now we're family? I spat ironically. How curious. Because when Mateo was waiting for his grandparents on his birthday, you were too busy spoiling Marcos's son. He was family then, wasn't he? Silence. That's what I thought. I turned to go inside, but my brother grabbed my arm. Don't you dare walk away from us like this. You have no right. I wrenched my arm free. Look at me. My father's face was red with fury. You're going to regret this. I held his gaze calmly. I don't think so. And with that I closed the door. This time I locked it. 2 weeks passed. Silence. Deep down I expected them to keep insisting, to keep calling. But for the first time in my life they let me go. Then one day I received a message from Lucia. Just wanted to say. I understand now. I see it. I'm sorry. I stared at the words for a long time before replying. It's not too late for you to walk away too. She didn't reply. But an hour later I saw that her Facebook status had changed to single. I smiled. Maybe, just maybe, I wasn't the only one breaking free. But just when I thought it was all over, another message arrived, this time from my mother. We lost the house. I stared at the screen, waiting for the guilt to hit me like a torrent. It never came. Instead, I set the phone aside, turned to Mateo and asked, What do you want for dinner, honey? His face lit up. Pizza. I smiled. Pizza it is. And with that, I closed the last door I had ever left open for them. For the first time, I was truly free. Moving on. Months passed, then a year. In the beginning, there were moments of doubt. Late at night when the house was quiet, I wondered, was I too harsh? Could I have handled it differently? But then I'd think of Mateo, of how he never had to hear me arguing with my parents anymore, of how his birthday the following year was filled with laughter and not disappointment. And that was enough to remind me I had made the right decision. My parents, of course, never fully gave up. After losing the house, they tried everything. Guilt, manipulation, even playing the victims to extended family. But I held firm. I refused to be their safety net again. 6 months after cutting them off, I was in a coffee shop, having coffee when my phone vibrated with a message from an unknown number. It's Mom. We need to talk. I exhaled slowly. It had been months since I last heard from her. Last I knew, they had moved in with Marcos, still drowning in debt, still not taking responsibility for the decisions that led them there. I hesitated to ignore it, but curiosity won. About what? I typed back. Seconds later, my phone rang. I sighed and answered. Honey, she began, her voice soft, filled with a forced warmth. It's been so long. How have you been? I'm fine, I replied coldly. What do you want? She hesitated. Your father isn't well. The stress has been too much for him. The house, everything. And Marcos, well, you know how he is. He tries, but it's not enough. We thought, maybe you could help us get back on our feet. Just a little. Nothing like before. I closed my eyes, gripping my coffee cup tightly. Here we go again. Mom, I said, keeping my voice firm. You lost your house because you took out loans you couldn't afford. You prioritized Marcos's comfort over your own security. And when I refused to bail you out, you tried to guilt-trip me instead of owning your mistakes. And now you want me to step in again. Isn't that right? It's not like that, she rushed to say. We're just asking for a little help. I didn't reply. Just a beat of silence then. Are you really going to leave us with nothing? I laughed bitterly. You left yourselves with nothing. And I hung up. 1 year later, life had never been so peaceful. My job was stable, Mateo was growing up happy, and for the first time my money, my hard-earned money, was being invested in building our future, not fixing other people's mistakes. The anxiety that used to be a constant in my life vanished. I no longer flinched when my phone rang, fearing another demand. I no longer carried the weight of other people's problems on my shoulders. Then one afternoon, I received an unexpected message from Lucia. I left him. I stared at the screen for a long moment, then typed, Are you okay? A few minutes later, my phone rang. I hesitated before answering. I just had to tell you, she said, her voice shaky. You were right about everything. I remained silent, waiting. I saw what they did to you, she continued. But I thought. She let out a bitter laugh. I thought I was different, that they would never treat me the way they treated you. But the moment things got tough, the moment I couldn't keep supporting Marcos anymore, he stopped trying. And then they turned on me, just like they did with you. I sighed. I'm sorry. Don't be, she said. I should have listened to you sooner. I should have seen him for who he really was. But I just didn't want to believe it. Where are you now? I asked, concerned for her, trying to figure out what to do next. With my sister, trying to figure things out, she replied. But I needed you to know. You did the right thing walking away. They never changed. I swallowed, feeling unexpected emotions welling up in my chest. Thank you for telling me, I replied. We talked for a few more minutes before saying goodbye. When I hung up, I stared out the window, feeling something strange and unexpected settling within me. Closure. 2 years later, I was in the backyard watching Mateo chase soap bubbles across the lawn, his laughter echoing in the warm afternoon air. Mommy, look, he called, pointing at a particularly large bubble floating towards the sky. That one's huge. I smiled as I watched him. I felt it again, that sense of freedom, of finally being in control of my own life. For so many years I believed family was something I had to sacrifice for, that love meant giving until there was nothing left of me. But I learned the truth. Real love, healthy love, doesn't come with conditions. It doesn't demand that you consume yourself for people who never gave you anything in return. I wasn't a bad person for choosing myself. I wasn't cruel for setting boundaries. And I wasn't heartless for refusing to be their financial safety net. I was simply free. Mommy! Mateo called again. I looked down at him, his eyes bright with excitement, his world still intact, unaware of the kind of pain I had endured, and I made a promise. He would never have to learn the lessons I learned. He would always know he was loved, not because he was useful, not because he was convenient, but simply because he was him. Months later, I received one last message from my mother. I hope someday you'll forgive us. I stared at the screen for a long time before finally typing my reply. I already did, but forgiving doesn't mean going back. Take care of yourselves. Then I blocked her number and never looked back.